Hello, all. Welcome to the show. I'm Gus Gagliardi, and this is Fire Code Tech. On Fire Code Tech, we interview fire protection professionals from all different careers and backgrounds in order to provide insight and a resource for those in the field. My goal is to help you become a more informed fire protection professional. Fire Code Tech has interviews with engineers and researchers, fire marshals, and insurance professionals, and highlights topics like codes and standards, engineering systems, professional development, and trending topics in the industry. So if you're someone who wants to know more about fire protection or the fascinating stories of those who are in the field, you're in the right place. Welcome to episode 32 of Fire Code Tech. This episode is sponsored by Wachter. More information on Wachter later on in the show. In this episode, we have Alexandra DeLucca. Alexandra talks to us about her extensive internship experience as well as her time at the University of Maryland. We get into some very interesting topics like wildfires and what it means to become a professional and learn how to network. If you are somebody who is looking to hone your soft skills or find out how to get an internship, I think you are really going to enjoy this episode. Don't forget to follow us on social media so you never miss an episode, and subscribe. Oh, and one more thing, if you want to go give us a 5-star rating and review on iTunes, that would be a big help. All right, let's dive into the show. Well, hello, Alexandra. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Gus. This is a really exciting opportunity.
Cool. Well, I wanted to get started in traditional fashion and get a sense of how you found an interest in fire and life safety.
Yeah, so I am from Maryland. I'm from Columbia, Maryland. And when I was growing up, I always kind of excelled in my STEM classes like math and sciences. And I liked them a lot in high school. So I kind of just figured I would go into the STEM field because that's what I was good at. That's what I like to do. And engineering was just such a huge field. I mean, it still is, obviously, but everyone was kind of telling me to look at engineering, and I did a few project lead the way courses in high school. So I was pretty familiar with it, and I just decided that that's where I was going to start, at least in college. But every time that I went on a college tour, like, I looked at the different engineering disciplines that the colleges had. None of them necessarily stuck out to me as something that I would love. I think most of the other colleges that I applied to, I applied undecided or mechanical just because that's so broad. But then I went on a tour of Maryland, and that's my state school, so it would have been, like, a really good, like, deal, like, in-state tuition and stuff, and I would have been close to home. And I went on a tour of University of Maryland. I went to their, engineering department, and they were giving a presentation on all the different disciplines, and I remember going up to the table, and it was all the classic ones like chemical, mechanical, and civil, but then they had one flyer that had a bunch of flames on it. So I was kinda like, "Oh, this is different. I've never seen it before." And I picked it up and I started reading about fire protection engineering. I was like, "Wow, that sounds really cool." And they did the whole presentation on fire protection, and then I think it was Dr. Milky that I went up and talked to, and I was asking questions, and him and Nicole Hollywood, I had, like, met them a bunch of times before going and deciding fire protection, but they were super, super supportive, and, like, they did a great job, showing off the department and kinda explaining how all the different opportunities that fire protection gives you, and how it's a really small community, and they, like, showed me the fire tornado, and it was really, really cool. So after just getting excited for, like, the first time about, like, what I could be doing in college, I decided to go and apply to University of Maryland as fire protection engineering. And I got in, and I started off with that, and I never really looked back. Like, it's been a really great experience the entire time.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, I have a similar experience, kind of with the general inclination towards a STEM degree and then falling into a great program for fire and life safety. That's so awesome that you got a chance to get involved with a program that is renowned really all over the world for fire protection engineering, and it was in your home state. I mean, that's about as good as it gets, really. But
Yeah,
that's
I got
awesome.
super lucky. I was really happy about it.
That's great. Yeah. So I totally resonate like that. You kind of know that you like doing math and science stuff, and you're like, whoa, what is this fire protection thing with such promise and interesting things going on? But that's great. I love that exposition.
Thank you.
Every time I get, the opportunity to speak with somebody who has an experience with like a different educational program within fire protection and life safety, because there's so few that actually are out there. There might be a half dozen across the nation, and those vary from technology degrees to engineering degrees, and there's even fewer master's programs out there. I like to try to get some insight about what's going on at these schools so that people can hear about them. Yeah, I just wanted to ask if you would give some high level overview of kind of your coursework and what you've enjoyed so far about your time at Maryland.
Yeah, of course. So, going in as a freshman, you don't do a whole lot of fire protection. Like any other college, it's a lot of gen eds, and you take your basic STEM weed out classes like the math and the physics and chemistry, stuff like that. But you do take a 1 credit course with Dr. Milky, and he kind of just teaches you like about what is fire protection at University of Maryland. And this course is super great because it's offered to people who aren't already in fire protection. So people in like undecided in the engineering school can take the course if they find it interesting. And then if they really like the course, then they'll switch into fire protection. So I think this class is really good for recruiting people into the program. And then when you get into your sophomore year, it's kind of the same thing. You take a lot more general engineering classes like thermo and mechanics, stuff like that. But you start off with one class your first semester, sophomore year, that's on life safety, and it's with Ken Isman. And he kind of just takes you through NFPA 101 and again is like introducing you to the NFPA um, codes and stuff. So I think that was really helpful for going into my internship after that year. And then once you get into your junior and senior year, it's all fire protection classes. So far, as a rising senior, I've taken classes that have gone to depth teaching on fire alarms, smoke control, sprinklers, life safety. And in a lot of those classes, it's dissecting the NFPA codes and getting really familiar with NFPA 13 and 72 and 101. So I think those are super helpful for the students when they're transitioning from the school, from like education to the workplace, and they're actually going to be using the NFPA codes. It's just super helpful that like you're so familiar with them and you've looked through them like cover to cover. And then there's other classes like I've taken heat and mass transfer and fluid mechanics, and next semester I'm taking fluid dynamics. So it's kind of those classes that are like theoretical stuff. So not as much what you're going to use in the workplace, but kind of the background behind all of it.
Yeah, that's great. It's it sounds like you already have a pretty good perspective for the courses and how they'll apply to what you want to do. Um, it's
Yeah.
interesting. We just got our first fire protection intern at the company that I work with uh, this just yesterday. So we'll date the episode, but um, yeah, and so I think it's interesting hearing you speak about how you kind of learn to apply the NFPA codes and standards and how that's a big part of the curriculum. I just wonder at the degree program at Maryland, because I had this sense about my time at OSU that it was a little bit more NFPA focused than like the International Building Code and Mechanical Code and Fire Code. I mean, we did talk about them, but not nearly as much as like 1372 and 101. What's your sense of that at the University of Maryland? Is that a similar thing, or is it different in your experience?
No, we've really mostly only focused on the NFPA codes. I know we did a little bit of the International Business Code in my life safety class, but definitely not as much as we did 101. And that's kind of what I found in the workplace is a lot of it is the NFPA codes too. So I think it's
Oh,
been
that's it.
helpful.
For sure. Yeah, you definitely need that rock solid basis in the NFPA codes. Yeah, but I spend a lot of time in the international codes just due to um, the FPE design work that I'm in. I think it's great to have that basis, but yeah, I appreciate that insight. But so you talked about a couple of your classes, but so far, what have you enjoyed the most about school? Like, what's kind of been I'm sure there's a lot of classes you really enjoyed, but which one has really piqued your interest the most?
I really liked my human response to fire class. I think I liked it mostly because of the project that we did. Um, the project that we did was we were given a building or a dormitory on campus. So it was a building that most of the students were familiar with and a lot of them had actually lived in. And we had to find the egress time for the whole building at full capacity to evacuate. And we did that through Pathfinder. So we had learned a lot about Pathfinder in that class and used it a lot. And for the project, it was just really cool because the prompt said stuff like, students in this study lounge are wearing soundproof headphones. So, you kind of had to add like extra time to them according to that. And, there were like certain like rooms that were handicapped. So it was like people in these rooms were in wheelchairs. So there's Pathfinder settings that you could change it to that. And I'd never worked with Pathfinder before, but I think it was really cool because it was just such a realistic situation that the students could relate to, and also, the Pathfinder program, I really liked watching, like, even the simulation when you run it, it shows the actual people walking down the building, and it was really cool. And
That's
then
awesome. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say for, non-engineering classes, I've taken a few special education classes, through gen eds, and I think outside of engineering, those classes are just super interesting to me.
Sorry, you said special education classes? Like,
Yeah.
what does that mean? Kind of. I don't think I
Um
understand.
It's learning about kinda different disabilities and, like, just being educated on, like, the history of disability and stuff like that, and it's just so different from my engineering classes and something that, like, I would have never taken in high school or anything, so, I don't know, it's really cool to
Oh,
learn about.
okay, yeah, that's awesome. Well, can see the direct overlap from your experience with Pathfinder and your interest in learning how to make things more accessible for those who have disabilities.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's cool to hear about. Performance-based design is something that's so neat, and I have a big interest in it. I don't get a chance to do much work involving using performance-based design in regards to egress systems for buildings, but yeah, I really have a big interest in that. When I was in school, we did this. My teacher was doing some research. I would think it was in our life safety class, and he gave us all the same set of instructions, or he would like change them a little bit with cardinal directions, and have us try to egress out through the building to try and test, like the effectiveness of a voice system. And we all kind of did different things. It was funny to see how the students all kind of reacted differently during the lab.
Yeah, that sounds really cool.
But yeah, I wanted to move on and speak a little bit more about your college career, and just yeah, I didn't know if you are involved with any professional societies or organizations at school. I'm sure that the University of Maryland has some great groups to get involved with.
Yeah, University of Maryland has a bunch. For me personally, I'm involved in Theta Tau, which is a professional co-ed engineering fraternity. So it's a really good mix of a social aspect of being able to meet other people who are engineers and you can hang out with them and do stuff, but also just the having like 90 engineers of multiple different disciplines, plus all the alumni, is such an amazing networking opportunity. Like, I know people in the fraternity that have reached out to the alumni and gotten jobs at Google and SpaceX. And it's just really cool that it's a very casual way of networking. But also, it's really fun. Just, you have like normal events like barbecues and stuff like that. So, I would definitely recommend Theta Tau to anyone who's interested in engineering at University of Maryland. I'm also involved with Clark School Ambassadors, and kind of what I talked about in the beginning of why I got involved in fire protection is I went to a presentation from Clark School Ambassadors. So they had people there speaking about each discipline, and that kind of got me wanting to join it so that I could promote fire protection. And while it's like I'm still an ambassador for the entire Clark School, since there's not many fire protection engineers, I really like to kind of promote that when I'm doing the presentation, say I'm fire protection, like these are all the opportunities, and educate people about the department because a lot of people don't know about it.
Yeah, that's so great. I think that people in all levels of the industry are trying to find ways to connect with the next generation of fire protection engineers. So I think that's awesome that you are um, taking the opportunity to get out there and spread the word about this great field. It sounds like you have already had so much great opportunity in regards to working in the space. So I love hearing that.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm very thankful for the opportunities I've gone through fire protection.
And yeah, I like that note also about networking and how it's important to join professional societies because of the invaluable connections and just fun experiences you can have. I uh, I was involved with some groups, but I wish I would have done more when I was at school. So that's a great point for people to hear about. But yeah, I wanted to kind of move forward and talk about your internship experience. You've had some wonderful internships so far. Would you speak a little bit on the different jobs you've held so far? It's your time at during your time at the University of Maryland.
Yeah, of course. So after my freshman year, I interned at Whiting Turner, which is a huge general contracting company. They're nationwide. And so this internship was definitely more, it wasn't fire protection, it was definitely more like general engineering. A lot of the other interns there were mechanical or civil. But since I was fire protection, I kinda thought it was a really cool opportunity to just be introduced to the built environment, and, so for the first half of it, I spent it, in the office, and I was helping plan for another project that they were doing in the future. So I was doing the bid calls, and I would call up the different subcontractors, and I would kinda tell them about the project that we were doing, and just through that, I gained such good speaking skills, like, over the phone, because 'cause I'd never really done cold calls like that before. And then also, we were working a lot with the budgeting for the new project. So it was really just cool to see, like, what went into a project before it even gets put on the ground. And then, the second half of the internship, I was on a construction site, and I was kinda just making sure that everything was running smoothly, and I would, like, go down and I was assigned to, the painting and the insulation subcontractors, so I would keep going down and checking their progress to make sure that they're completing what they need to do for the day and staying on schedule. And that was also just really cool to see, the project being put together and like how much can like actually go wrong in construction and how everybody can fix it and like work on their feet. So I think that was the as a first internship, it was perfect because it really introduced me to general engineering, the built environment. And then after my so my second semester sophomore year, I ended up getting a co-op at Walt Disney World. So I wasn't in school for that semester. And I went down to Florida and I got to work with the fire protection team. And that was my first real fire protection experience. So it was a lot of, I was introduced to Revit and AutoCAD, and, I'd never worked with them before, so I was kinda just figuring it out, but I was doing a lot of, design planning and, like, kinda making the drawings, like, up to date, so I would have to, like, go into a building and, like, if stuff was changed around, I'd, like, go mark it and come back and change it, and then, a lot of it was also I was doing, smoke testing work. You would go in and it kinda taught me, like, about the fire alarms and the smoke detectors and, like, how you do all the testing and stuff for that, which I found to be really cool. And then I also learned a little bit about fire dynamics through the internship, which I'm not even taking that class until next semester, but I think just being in the workplace and being surrounded by fire protection kinda elevates you, like, even more and, like, it's learning on the job, so it was super, super helpful and just such a cool opportunity to be, working for Walt Disney World, which had always been a dream company of mine. It was also one of the reasons why I joined fire protection because I knew that it was huge at Disney. And, yeah, their internship program was absolutely incredible. They have, like, 300 just engineering interns, working together. It was really, really cool. And
Wow.
so that the semester that I did that was, when COVID hit. So, unfortunately, we didn't finish our internships, and I went home around, April, May-ish, but, there was a posting for another project management, internship that was locally in Maryland, so I applied for it, and it was for Doyle Construction Company. So, I went back and I was doing a little bit more with them on, uh I was doing more project management construction work, and it was cool doing it a second time around because I felt like I had a lot more responsibilities, and the project that I was doing was, like, just starting, so, again, it was, like, a lot of the planning and, like, making the schedule for it.
I can't believe you got some great experience, like getting a general sense of, uh, how the construction process works, getting the opportunity to work with some general contractors, and then also getting to work with some fire protection engineers and see some inspecting, testing, and maintenance, and some fire dynamics as well. It sounds like that's all great experience.
Yeah, they were really awesome experiences. And, this summer, I'm gonna do something a little bit more similar to what I did at Disney. It's a fire protection internship for AirUp, and they're a international company. So they have locations all over the globe, which I found to be really, really cool. So I'm gonna be working specifically with their Boston office, and I'm really excited for that.
That's going to be great. Yeah, we were talking a little bit off air about your next role and how you're excited to get into the BIM and the modeling and Revit a little bit more. That's great. I think you're going to really enjoy it. I do a lot of BIM work at the company I work for now, and I have a lot of fun with it, and it's great because every day is a different challenge. But yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about, and you can share whatever you would like about your research that you've been involved with. Would you speak a little bit about, because I always hear about wildfires and how we're trying to learn about fires in nature and really kind of close the gap on this natural phenomenon, but it's kind of outside of my wheelhouse as far as like what I do on a day-to-day basis. So I saw that you had some experience with that. I didn't know if you would like to share. Want to take a moment to talk about our sponsor today, Walkter. Walkter is a family-owned business that provides services in many commercial and industrial market sectors, including electrical and fire alarm systems, the Internet of Things, digital transformation, and much, much more. Walkter is headquartered out of Lenexa, Kansas, but is decentralized in that they have technicians across the nation. They are looking for good candidates for fire alarm technicians in a variety of locations across the U.S. You can find out the details of these jobs and much more about Walkter on walkter.com/careers. That's WACHTER.com/careers. Let's get back to the show.
Yeah, of course. I was in the same boat. I had never really learned anything about wildfires, either in my classes or like I didn't know that much outside of my research. But I started doing this research project with Dr. Milky, and the research that we did was on occupant evacuation behavior in wildland fires. So we focused on people who lived in wildland urban interface areas. And originally, we wanted to create a timeline kind of how long it takes the average person to go through the pre-movement steps of evacuating once they hear the fire signal. But we learned as we started gathering information that there's really not much information on the actual timing. So, what we kind of focused more on through the research was we were gathering data from existing articles, and we were interviewing different people, like professionals in the field, and people have also done research on that. And we kind of focused on what pre-movement actions people actually took. And because when you get the signal that there's like you need to evacuate, there's so much going through your mind, like there's a fire and it's, it can like take down your house or your whole livelihood, like people who own farms and ranches and stuff like that. So it was a lot of what goes through people's minds when they get a signal, and also what, what evacuation signal works best? Is it like a alarm, or is it sending just a text message to people's phones? Like, what is the most effective in getting people to evacuate? And, what we kinda learned about this is, like well, what I learned because I don't live in an area with a lot of wildfires, and, like so if there was a wildfire, like, I would absolutely evacuate. But I learned through this research that a lot of people want to stay and defend their property either because, they don't want to lose their house, or they have animals there, like they have a farm or they have crops. So the people who do want to stay and defend their property, what can they do to make it safer for them? Like, how can they set up their land, or what resources can they get that would make it a better situation for them to be able to like fight this fire?
Wow. Yeah, I don't have much experience either. I feel like I would wanna, even as much as I know about fire, I think I'd be pretty driven to want to protect my home and this thing that
Yeah.
has all of my things that are important to me, and like such a huge investment of your huge piece of your net worth is probably your house and all the things inside of it. So I don't know. That's kind of an interesting thing to think about. Your head telling you, "Hey, we probably should get out of here," and your heart telling you, "Oh my gosh, like I can only really get what you can shove in the car or whatever to get out." But
Yeah,
that's a
absolutely.
wild scenario to talk about. So I wanted to circle back to that your time at Walt Disney, even though it sounds like you kind of had a wild ride with the pandemic and whatnot. No pun intended. But um, uh, so like when you were doing this inspection, testing, and maintenance, like, so were you walking around like with the can of smoke on a pole and like actually applying it to smoke detectors, or like what kind of were you doing when you were, um, kind of looking at smoke in the different areas? And you talked about it for rides, but yeah, I'd love to hear more about that. I think that sounds really fascinating.
Yeah, that's pretty much exactly what we were doing. So there I usually wasn't the one that was spraying it, uh, but sometimes they would let me, which was cool. Um, but a lot of what we were doing was spraying it, and then you kinda see how long it takes to go into the, notification and then to go into the alarm. So they have specific times that, and it was all through computer programming, so you had to time, like, at what point does it go into that it was notified that there is smoke, and then at what point does it go into, "Okay, that was, like, enough that it's an alarm and we need to, like, shut down." So that was a lot of the testing that we did.
Interesting. Yeah, I've had the opportunity to do some of that testing myself. I've got the chance one time to get up in a boom lift and use like a can of smoke on a duct detector in an aircraft hangar. So we were up like 80 feet in the air, like trying to get the test port open on this duct detector and try to spray it into this detector in this unit that's super high off the ground, and the thing is swaying, and the technician's
Yeah.
like trying to move around and get a good angle to get the smoke into this port. And so
Yeah, it was really
yeah, I've
cool.
yeah.
Another thing, we also did testing for, the wiring of the pole stations and the fire alarm. So you'd kinda go around and you would do the pole station, and then you'd have a walkie-talkie and someone would be like, "Okay, that was number this," and then you'd be like, "Yes, that was the right number," or like, "No, that's the wrong number."
Oh, I got you. So you're testing the pull stations and checking the ID on the pull station in the
Mhm.
programming for the fire alarm panel.
Yeah. So it's
And did
cool
you
to
guys
kinda learn
have?
about I was gonna say it's cool to kinda learn about the fire alarm panel, 'cause I'd
Oh
never, like, gotten
yeah,
experience with one.
man. The more experience I get as a FPE, like the water and the sprinkler systems makes a lot of sense to me. But the thing that I get more confused about on a daily basis is fire alarm systems and how complex that they can get. Yeah, in the proprietary, programming for each of these systems. It seems like there's so much depth there. So I feel what you're saying about learning about them is cool.
Yeah.
But so I wanted to talk a little bit about your career and kind of where you see yourself going. It seems like you already have so much perspective and drive for somebody who is so early in their career. Um, I wanted to ask, like, kind of where do you see yourself going? I know it's hard to say. Sounds like you're gonna get your first like full on, hopefully no more pandemic, all summer like fire protection engineering design internship this summer. But yeah, where do you see yourself leaning towards as far as a career at this point?
I think at this point, I'd probably see myself going into the built environment. The research that I did with wildfires, I thought that was really cool and different, but I definitely see myself in more of a construction-based role. I think that's what I find to be the most fun and interesting. Through my internships, I realized that I find design work and like Revit and AutoCAD to be pretty rewarding and enjoyable. I really like doing that. But also through like my project management and construction internships, I know that I love being on site and I don't really like being at a desk 24/7. I like to get up and walk around and see what's happening. So I think hopefully, in like my career that I go into, I'm hoping to have a role where, it's like 50-50 where I'm doing the design work for different like fire suppression systems, but also I'm able to go out onto the site and look and do inspections or testing, stuff like that. Um, as far as like what company or what location, I have no idea. That's something that I'm still trying to figure out, and I don't know.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't have to have it figured out. And you know what I out of college, I had a job for a fire suppression contractor for a while doing design before I switched. About a year in, I switched to working for an architecture and engineering firm, and so you don't have to, it's just your first role in the industry. And if you find out, hey, I think I want to spend some more time on the construction side and work closer to the actual building part of the process, then you'll have the opportunity to. But also, I'm sure you could find that experience working for a firm that does just fire protection engineering, because in one of these large states that you're talking about, or large cities that you're talking about, potentially working in like a Boston or a DC, you're going to get a lot of opportunity to get on site and to see things firsthand. That'll be a pretty unique environment. I don't know, that's just kind of my perspective, being a middle of America, um, FPE, and there's we do work kind of all over the nation, but uh, it's I've always been super interested in big cities kind of do business in their own special way. Like especially Boston has really unique codes and standards.
Yeah, I think I've never worked like in a city before, so I'm very excited to see how they handle like skyscrapers and stuff like that. That's just something that I've never worked with.
Oh yeah, I'm sure you'll get a chance to. High rise construction is it's a whole different ball game than general construction for business occupancies. I've had some recently where I've gotten the opportunity to work on high rise construction, and so you'll get to probably work on some smoke control systems and stairwell pressurization systems, in addition to the more common sprinkler and fire alarm systems, and definitely some standpipes if you get a chance to work on some high-rise buildings, and fire pumps, and depending on how tall, fire pumps at multiple levels within the building. So high rises are more challenging and more complex, and I think more fun probably too, but as long as things go well. But yeah, that's awesome. I'm excited for you.
Me too.
So you've had such great, I won't call it luck, because obviously you have a wonderful ability to communicate, and, to really go out there and hustle to get work. So I just wanted to ask, what advice would you give to people who are looking to, you know, get internships as a young professional? What would you tell people to do, since you are an expert in it? You've done it like 3 4 times now.
I think just the key to getting opportunities is networking and kind of just at every opportunity, mention either that you're like fire protection or like talk about your career goals or what you want to do because, like when you're meeting new people in like the professional workplace, if you say like, oh yeah, I'm fire protection, I really want to go into like arson investigation, they could know someone in arson investigation. Like if you never mentioned that, then you wouldn't get the opportunity to go into that. So even I've talked to so many people who have been like, "Oh yeah, my yoga instructor got me this job and it was super cool just because they mentioned that this is what they did." So I think just networking and putting yourself out there. LinkedIn, I think, is an amazing platform. Just the fact that you can look anyone up from either, you can just even start at, people who graduated from your school. And especially with Maryland, there's so many fire protection graduates. So people who graduate from your school, and if you want a specific company, then you can like narrow it down to that company and people who graduate from your school. And then those are people that you can just message on LinkedIn and reach out to. And most people that I've done it a few times where if I was interested in a role, I just messaged them on LinkedIn. And most people in fire protection are so nice, especially because, like you said, a lot of people want the industry to grow, and they're always looking for a new generation of people to come in and work. So if you just kind of try and like message. I don't know, I think you'll people have more luck than they expect, especially with cold calling people. I think they're a lot more likely to answer than you would think. I also think it's really smart to start at a bigger company. At least in my experience, I think when other companies, either big or small, see like a nationwide or like a international company like Wedding Turner, Disney, or Arup, those are companies that people recognize and they're more likely to ask you questions about it. Or even like, I know I've talked to consultants who have worked with like both Wedding Turner and Disney, and then that gives you a common ground to kind of talk about stuff. So big companies I definitely think are a good starting point. And lastly, I would just say, like, don't count yourself out just because 'cause you're young. Because I know, like, a lot of internships will s I mean, I think almost every internship, like, I know even when I first started off as a freshman and I tried to get an internship at Wedding Turner, they were like the first person I talked to was like, "Oh, like, we don't hire fire protection engineers." But then I went and talked to another person, they were like, "Oh, that's really cool, like, that's different," and they gave me an interview. So, I think just, like, don't necessarily take no as an answer, or, like, if the application says you're too young, like, "We only hire juniors and above," then if you still just apply and, like, they might give you an interview, and or if they might give you an interview, they might not hire you, but the next year, like, they could hire you. So, I think just kinda go for opportunities, and you'll get more than you think.
Wow, you had a lot of great pearls of wisdom in that little I that sounds dramatic, but I'm being serious. Like, as somebody who's been to a bunch of career fairs and done that same work of going up to people and saying, "Hey, I'd like an internship. I'd love to hear about your company." And then people saying, "Well, we don't really need sophomores or freshmen at the time." And then coming back and being like, "Hey, Polly, I remember you from last year. I had another internship in the meantime, and I still am super fascinated about what you're doing, and like that is a skill and something that is some people never kind of obtain that ability to be affable and try to make connections and be persistent. Operating in any business capacity is you have to have persistence and you have to have a drive to get things done. So people see that and people recognize that, and I think that's a great piece of advice. Even though I could sound corny at times, being like, "Wow, you really got it going on," but I'm serious. People need to hear that. It's important to keep putting yourself out there. I have
Absolutely.
a I have a sister-in-law that's in school right now, and I'm trying to being a code nerd and being somebody who has a big interest in professional development. I'm always trying to tell her to reach out to people on LinkedIn or like connect with people who you think that what they do is cool, because people want to talk about, like, if they have a great job and they're passionate about what they do, they want to tell people about it and they want to help out somebody who is early on in their career and is really trying to make something of themselves. So
Yeah, absolutely. Even if like, you don't wanna message someone on LinkedIn and be like, "Hey, I want an internship at your company," but because, like, you don't even if you don't even know that much about the company, but if you reach out to them and you're like, "Hey, like, I think what you do is really, really cool. Can you tell me more about it?" Then they'll be like, "Yes, I would love to talk about what I love to do."
yeah, I think you need to be careful about your ask, and like you said, make sure your ask is not too big. That the ask of, "Hey, would you mind telling me about what you do?" I think that's interesting. That's a phone call of 5 to 30 minutes is nothing. That's a very minimal investment for anybody to give out. But if you come off too strong, I see this on LinkedIn sometime from people. They have no rapport, and their immediate thing is to do is to ask. And
Mhm.
you want to get a baseline of rapport with people, and you know connect to them like they're a human being, not an opportunity for you to get something.
Absolutely.
And you'll have a lot more success. Um, because I've seen it both ways. I have to do it all the time for the podcast and talk to people, and I have people who will be like, "Do you want this certification that I'm selling? Do you want it?" And just blow up my inbox with 5 messages. I'm like, I want to block you. That's about the only thing I want from you. But yeah, so that's great. But yeah, I love talking about professional development stuff. So you have to excuse me if I geek out for a minute. But
No, you're
uh,
totally fine. Yeah.
seeing as you're like in school and kind of in the thick of it, as far as like learning and getting an idea of what's going on in the field, I just wanted to pick your brain and see, like, do you see any, what do you see as trends right now in the industry? And this could be broad, like this could be business wise, or, you know, fire protection wise, or, just construction, involving construction. Like, yeah,
Yeah, of course. So I think fire protection wise, there's a lot more emphasis on, like, even when I was just doing the research on wildfires, almost everything resource that I was looking at was a recent resource. So I think definitely a lot more people are looking into wildfires and kind of switching over to that, which is really, really needed right now, with everything going on. So I think that's a super good trend in the fire protection community to have that rising. I think from like a general business or like engineering standpoint, people are trying to be a lot more sustainable and, like practice stuff that's more environmentally friendly for when they're doing buildings. I know Air the company that I'm gonna intern at this summer, that's what they told me, like, in the interviews, like, "That's what we're focusing a lot on this, like, we wanna be more sustainable and kinda, like, keep, the world that we have and not make it worse," which I love. I think that's super important. I think every company should be held to standards of doing that.
yeah, yeah, that's great. I've had, they're not as common as they were when I first got in the industry, but these jobs called lead jobs, which is basically like, you basically, it's like a certification for your building, and you check off all of these different points for like using renewable materials, or like making your building more sustainable. But so I've had some experience with that. You can get your building certified at different degrees of lead, if you will, and it's so that's interesting. It's hard as a fire protection person. I don't understand a lot of the ways that we can buy into that sustainable movement, other than the materials is really the only way I know of, or maybe we could capture like the testing liquids that could be considered. Like if you have to do a fire pump test, you're discharging back into the fire protection water storage tank or something like that. It's not as linear as for architects. Have they can just make their roof out of some like the renewable thatch material or something, and have big impact on the making the whole building construction more sustainable. But it's an interesting prospect for sure. And as far as wildfires, yeah, I keep seeing a bunch about them in the community. It seems like it's definitely a subject that's blowing up as far as research.
Yeah, absolutely, and much
But
needed.
oh yeah, yeah, we gotta understand it better because it impacts thousands of people's lives. But yeah, so we're getting close to the end here, but I just wanted to pick your brain on where you like to get information about fire and life safety. Like, I know we've talked a little bit about your experience so far, and how you've managed to succeed, but yeah, where do you like to go to learn about fire and life safety?
Well, right now since I'm in school, every day that like I'm going to my classes, I'm learning more and more about fire and life safety. So just being a student is like I'm taking in so much knowledge every day. And also, through my internships or just talking to like professionals in the field, if you say like you ask them any question like, "Oh, like what do you do?" Then they can like go on and on. They'll be like, "Oh, like I'd love to like read this and like you should definitely, if you look at like NFPA like this, then you can find, whatever." So just talking to people in the field, my professors, I think the NFPA handbooks definitely super great resource for everyone. Um, and I don't know. I think they're once you understand how to read them, then each one is like gets a little bit more easier to read. So I think if people use that as a resource, it's super helpful. But right now, it's mostly I'm just being a student and I'm learning from my teachers and from people in my workplace that I'm working with.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely resonate that. I mean, you got to soak up as much as you can while you're in school because you have these great resources at hand, and making relationships with your professors, and having the ability to get to know them, and really get some insight and perspective about their great careers is probably one of the most invaluable assets you have at your hands right now. Um, and so I'm a really big fan of the people component of learning too. So I hear what you're saying. You're gonna be able to learn probably like 10 times more than you would be able to, by speaking with somebody who's an industry expert than by trying to go find some obscure blog article about fire protection, or something specific that you want to learn about. Better to go
Yeah,
talk to the person who's made it their life's passion to know about this thing.
absolutely.
I just want to thank you for your time, Alexandra. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm really excited to see where your career takes you. I think it seems like you got it figured out.
Thank you so much, Gus. This is super fun.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Be sure to share the episode with a friend if you enjoyed it. Don't forget that fire protection and life safety is serious business. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are by no means a professional consultation or a codes and standards interpretation. Be sure to contact a licensed professional if you are getting involved with fire protection and or life safety. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.